What if the Bible didn't just omit details, but removed an entire group on purpose? Not the Nephilim, but the women who carried them. Some interpretations suggest they were the first human bodies altered at a genetic level, and if that alteration didn't end, what part of you was never fully human? What if history isn't a record of progress, but a carefully managed erasure of a biological catastrophe that redefined our species? We have been taught to focus exclusively on the giants, the Nephilim, the monstrous warriors of old who toppled kingdoms. But in doing so, we have ignored the most disturbing part of the equation, the mothers. Some ancient texts suggest that the union between the Watchers and human women wasn't just a moral transgression or a myth of celestial lust. It was a sophisticated, forced evolution of the human female anatomy. Certain interpretations propose that for a human woman to successfully carry a Nephilim, her entire cellular structure had to be modified by external intervention. This wasn't a natural pregnancy, it was a hybridization protocol, a cosmic breach that history has spent millennia trying to hide from the collective consciousness. Scholars have long questioned why the names of these women were systematically scrubbed from the canon, leaving them as nameless shadows in the biblical narrative. A debated theory indicates that these women didn't just survive the contact with the fallen ones, they became something else entirely. If the biological breach occurred at the deepest DNA level, then we are looking at the first recorded instance of transhumanism in the ancient world. But here's where it gets disturbing. What if that genetic modification wasn't a one-time event, but a permanent insertion into the human genome that survived the Great Cleansing? This suggests that the deluge was not merely a divine judgment on sin, but a desperate biological quarantine and attempt to wipe a corrupted genetic script before it could fully overwrite the human race. Some ancient traditions suggest that the women chosen for this cosmic union were not selected at random, but were specifically sourced from the lineage of Cain, the first murderer. A theory debated among historians indicates that the beauty described in Genesis was actually a result of advanced technological enhancements provided by the Watchers. These women weren't just physically attractive, they were being prepared as biological vessels. They were taught the forbidden arts not as primitive magic, but as sciences that the human mind was never meant to grasp. Certain interpretations of ancient texts raise the possibility that what we call cosmetics and jewelry today were originally tools for frequency manipulation and genetic marking, allowing the Watchers to maintain a tether to their subjects across dimensions. That alone raises a serious question. If these women were using technology to alter their appearance and biological frequency, who was actually in control? The Book of Enoch suggests that the Watchers taught them the secrets of roots, plants, and the cutting of metals. But this wasn't simple herbalism or basic smithing. Some interpretations suggest these women were the first to master hormonal manipulation and chemical warfare. They weren't just mothers of giants. They were the architects of a civilization that relied on forbidden biology to dominate the earth. They became the bridge between the human and the divine fallen, creating a society that was so advanced and so terrifying that it had to be completely submerged in water and forgotten. And this is where the theory changes. Most people believe the Great Flood was a total reset, but certain interpretations propose it was an incomplete attempt at sterilization. If the mothers had successfully integrated celestial DNA into the human line, the entire species was already becoming a hybrid. A debated theory indicates that the women who birthed the Nephilim underwent an expansion of their own physical and mental capacities. They became semi-divine, possessing a longevity and strength that rivaled the giants themselves. They were the queens of Enoch, ruling over pre-Diluvian cities with a power that history had to delete to maintain the narrative of human weakness and dependence. But that creates a contradiction. If the goal was to wipe out the hybrid bloodline, why do ancient texts from across the globe continue to speak of demigods and heroes of old appearing after the deluge? Some scholars have questioned if the genetic code survived not through the giants, who were physically destroyed, but through the women who boarded the ark. Is it possible that the wives of Noah's sons carried the recessive markers of this forbidden hybridization? Certain interpretations of the Dead Sea Scrolls suggest that the purity of the bloodline was the primary concern of the ancient patriarchs because they knew the breach was already inside the family. The obsession with genealogy wasn't about pride. It was about tracking a dormant infection that had already crossed the threshold of the ark. But here's where it gets disturbing. We are looking at a past that looks suspiciously like our future. Today, we talk about CRISPR, gene editing, and the merger of biology and technology as if they are new frontiers. Some ancient texts suggest we aren't innovating, we are remembering. A debated theory indicates that the women of the Nephilim era were the original prototypes for a post-human world. They were the first to have their biological limiters removed by external intelligences. If that's true, the forbidden arts they practiced, the alchemy of the body, never truly disappeared. They were just rebranded as modern science. We are simply finishing the work that began in the days of Jared, using modern tools to achieve an ancient, non-human goal. Were these women victims of a celestial invasion, or were they willing participants in an upgrade that promised them the status of goddesses? Some ancient texts suggest they were worshipped as such, leading a matriarchy of shadow that governed the world through secrets and genetic superiority. The silence of the Bible regarding their identities isn't an accident. It's a tactical removal of the most dangerous part of the story. The realization that humanity was once something much more, and much more dangerous than we are allowed to believe today. Their erasure was a way to keep us from recognizing our own potential and our own contamination. What if the fallen didn't just want offspring? What if they wanted to turn the human female into a gateway, a biological portal for their own essence to remain anchored in the physical realm? Certain interpretations of ancient Mesopotamian tablets raise the possibility that the Nephilim mothers were anchors for a frequency that allowed the Watchers to bypass the laws of our dimension. If that gateway was ever opened, can it ever truly be closed? What if the history you've been told is just the edited version of a genetic war that we are still losing, a conflict where the battlefield is not land, but the very marrow of our bones? The deeper we dig into the rabbinic interpretations and the fragments of the Second Temple period, the more we find that these women were the primary conduits for a technology of the soul. Certain interpretations propose that the forbidden knowledge included the secret of the mirror and the metal. While common history dismisses this as simple vanity, some ancient texts suggest these were actually scrying tools, early forms of visual communication and surveillance that allowed these women to see across time and space. If they could see the future, they weren't just birthed by history, they were designing it from the shadows, ensuring that their lineage would persist through every subsequent collapse of civilization. A debated theory indicates that the mothers of the Nephilim were the ones who truly organized the pre-Diluvian world into a grid of power. While the giants were the brute force, the women held the keys of resonance. Scholars have questioned if the megalithic structures we find today, stones so large they defy modern engineering, were actually commissioned by these women using the harmonic frequencies they learned from their celestial partners. Some ancient traditions suggest that the voices of these women could move matter, a biological gift inherited through the alteration of their vocal cords during the hybridization process. But that raises a serious question. If such power existed, where did it go? Did it vanish? Or was it simply locked away behind a genetic gate? And this is where the theory changes. We are often told that the flood was a total reset, but certain interpretations of the Dead Sea Scrolls raise the possibility that the knowledge was encoded into the very marrow of the survivors. Some scholars have questioned if the marks of the Watchers were passed down through the mitochondrial DNA, the line that only a mother can provide. This would mean that the cosmic breach didn't need a giant to survive. It only needed a daughter. A debated theory indicates that the resurgence of giants in the land of Canaan wasn't a new invasion, but a reactivation of dormant genes triggered by specific rituals or environmental changes. If the genetic signature of the Nephilim mothers is recessive, then it could be sitting dormant in millions of people today, waiting for the right frequency to wake up. Certain interpretations of ancient Hermetic texts suggest that the great work of alchemy is actually the pursuit of reactivating this lost celestial DNA. They aren't trying to create something new. They are trying to return to the state of the mothers of the fallen. This shifts the perspective from a religious myth to a terrifying biological reality. We might be carrying the seeds of our own replacement in our blood. Some ancient texts suggest that the beauty of these women was so radiant it was described as lethal to the human gaze. This wasn't just aesthetic, it was a radiation of power. A debated theory indicates that these women were the original sirens of myth beings whose biological frequency could override the free will of any pure human. If the history of the world is a history of being led into wars and collapses by unseen hands, certain interpretations propose that we have been following the subtle influence of this hidden matriarchy for thousands of years. They are the directors of a play we didn't know we were in, manipulating the human heart through an inherited celestial magnetism. And this connects to our modern obsession with the eye. The Book of Enoch specifically mentions that the Watchers taught women the art of beautifying the eyelids. Some scholars have questioned if this was actually the teaching of the evil eye, a way of focusing spiritual energy through the gaze to manipulate the physical world. If these women were the first to master the gaze of power, then every image we consume today, every screen we look at, might be a digital extension of that original forbidden art. We are still looking into the mirrors they created, and we are still being shaped by the frequencies they set in motion toward a biological finish line we didn't draw. If the mothers are still the architects, our technological evolution is merely a reactivation of their ancient code. We aren't inventing the future, we are summoning a suppressed past. Every innovation brings us closer to the final breach. Look at your reflection. Is that curiosity yours, or an inherited hunger for the forbidden? The signature of the Watchers is waking up in our very cells. Don't let the truth be erased again. Subscribe now and comment Gateway below to unlock the hidden files they don't want you to see.